I stood at the doorstep of my childhood home, my hands resting on the familiar wooden frame. It was the same house where I grew up, where my parents once told me they knew what was best for me. The same house where, years ago, they shut the door in my face and told me to figure out life on my own. But today I wasn't here to beg for acceptance. I was here as the owner. A twisted sense of irony curled in my stomach. Life had a funny way of turning things around. Once I had left this house with nothing but a duffel bag and a heart full of resentment. Now I had returned, not as the lost, broke college dropout they had abandoned, but as a man who had built himself from the ground up. I took a deep breath, feeling the crisp autumn air fill my lungs. The house still looked the same chipped paint, same slightly crooked mailbox. But I was different. I knocked. The door swung open, and there stood my father, his face lined with the same stern disapproval I had known my entire life. He blinked at me, confusion washing over his face. "Jake?" His voice was hesitant, like he wasn't sure if he was seeing a ghost. I gave him a polite smile. "Hey, Dad. Long time no see." Footsteps shuffled from the living room. My mother appeared behind him, her eyes widening as she took in my presence. "What are you doing here?" she demanded, her voice sharper than I remembered. I slid my hands into my pockets, keeping my posture relaxed. "I came to talk business." Dad frowned. "Business?" I exhaled slowly, enjoying the moment. "Yeah. You see, I'm your new landlord." The silence that followed was the kind that stretched for miles. My father's lips parted slightly, but no words came out. My mother clutched the doorway as if steadying herself. "You bought the house?" she whispered, disbelieving. "That's right," I said smoothly. "And we need to discuss the rent." I watched as their expressions shifted, shock, disbelief, and finally, a creeping realization that for the first time in their lives, they weren't the ones holding the power. It was a moment I had imagined countless times, back when I was barely scraping by, flipping burgers to survive. But now that I was here, standing in front of them, I wondered, was this truly the victory I had been chasing all these years? I had lost everything the day they turned me away. Today, I had returned. But was this really what winning looked like? Years ago, the kitchen smelled like overcooked meatloaf and disappointment. I sat at the dinner table, pushing a sad pile of peas around my plate, knowing exactly where this conversation was headed. My father's fork clattered against his plate, a deliberate sound meant to draw my attention. "How's that business degree coming along?" he asked, his voice laced with false concern. My grip tightened on my fork. I had prepared for this moment, but no amount of mental rehearsal could stop the uneasy churn in my stomach. I set my fork down, staring at the mess of food before me. It was now or never. "Actually," I hesitated, then took a breath. "I've been thinking about switching majors." The air in the room turned thick. Dad's chewing slowed. My mother froze mid-sip of her iced tea. The only sound was the ticking clock in the hallway. "Switching?" Dad finally spoke, his voice dangerously calm. "Yeah." My voice wavered, but I forced myself to continue. "I want to study computer science instead." The reaction was instant. My father nearly choked on his food, coughing as his face turned red, not from the meatloaf, but from anger. "Are you kidding me?" he sputtered. "Computer science? You mean that foolish hobby is ruining your future?" I swallowed hard. "It's not a hobby, Dad. It's what I love. I think I can do really well in it." My mother scoffed, shaking her head. "Jake, thinking has never been your strong suit," she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. A slow burn of frustration crawled up my spine. I clenched my fists under the table, resisting the urge to snap back. "You don't understand," I tried again. "I enjoy it, and there's a real future in tech. I can— Passion costs nothing, Dad interrupted, slamming his fork down. A degree in business makes money. You think playing around with computers is going to pay the bills? I wanted to yell, to tell them how wrong they were. But I knew better. Arguing with them was like screaming into a storm. Mom folded her arms. No more childhood, Jake. You need to think ahead, not chase some fantasy. I looked between them, my heart pounding. They didn't care. They never cared. To them, I was a project, a future investment. Any deviation from their plan meant failure. Had to get out of there. The rest of dinner passed in silence, tension thick enough to cut with a knife. When it was over, I retreated to my room, slamming the door shut. I collapsed onto my bed, staring at the ceiling, my chest heavy with frustration. I needed to talk to someone who understood. I grabbed my phone and dialed Ashley's number. She picked up on the first ring. "How'd it go?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. "Like a freaking disaster," I muttered, rubbing my temples. "They acted like I told them I was dropping out to join the circus." She sighed. "Jake, you have to stand up for yourself. This is your life, not theirs." I let out a bitter laugh. "Easier said than done." "Yeah, but you're 22. You don't owe them control over your future," she insisted. Her words sat heavy in my chest. I hated that she was right. For years, I had let my parents dictate my life, but I wasn't a kid anymore. I needed to act like it. I woke up with a knot of determination in my gut. This time I wouldn't let them steamroll me. I walked downstairs, my heart pounding in my ears as I found them sitting in the living room watching TV. "Mom, Dad, we need to talk," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. My father muted the TV, both of them turning to face me expectantly. "I'm switching my major," I stated, forcing myself to hold their gaze. "And that's final." Dad's jaw tightened. "No, you're not." "I am," I shot back. "I'm an adult. This is my decision and I'm making it." Mom stood, arms crossed. "If you're such an adult," she said coolly, "then you can support yourself." For a moment, I didn't process what she had just said. Then it hit me like a freight train. "What?" I breathed. Dad's voice was steel. "You have 24 hours to pack your things and leave." I stood there frozen, like my brain couldn't comprehend what was happening. "You can't be serious?" I whispered. But the look on their faces told me they were. They had been waiting for an excuse to push me out. And now, they had it. I don't remember walking back to my room, but suddenly I was there, staring at my empty duffel bag. I had nowhere to go, no plan. I was their son. But in that moment, I was nothing to them. With shaking hands, I grabbed my phone and called Mike. "Dude," I said, my voice barely above a whisper, "they kicked me out." There was no hesitation. "Pack your stuff," he said. "You're staying with me." I stared at my closet, my hands trembling. They had thrown me away like garbage, and yet, somehow I felt relieved. I didn't have to live under their rule anymore. I had lost my home. But maybe, just maybe, I had found my freedom. Mike's apartment smelled like stale pizza and unwashed laundry, but to me it was a palace. It wasn't much. A cramped one-bedroom with a sagging couch and a bathroom door that didn't fully close, but at least it had 4 walls and a roof. At least I wasn't on the street. I dropped my duffel bag by the door and exhaled. "Thanks, man. I owe you." Mike clapped a hand on my shoulder. "Dude, don't even worry about it. Stay as long as you need." But we both knew that as long as you need wasn't really an option. Mike was barely scraping by himself, and I had almost no savings. I needed a job. Fast. The only place that would hire me on such short notice was a dingy little diner called Sunnyside Restaurant. It was the kind of place where the grease on the grill was probably older than some of the customers. I worked long shifts, flipping burgers and scrubbing floors, all while Earl, my grumpy manager, barked orders at me like I was in boot camp. It paid like garbage, but it was something. At night, I took a second job as a security guard at a rundown office building downtown. The pay wasn't great, but at least I didn't have to deal with customers. Just me, an old security desk, and a radio that barely worked. Most nights, I sat in the dimly lit lobby, staring at the flickering city lights outside, wondering how my life had turned into this. I was exhausted. I barely slept. I was surviving, not living. No matter how hard I worked, it wasn't enough. Rent, groceries, bus fare, the numbers didn't add up. I tried keeping up with my classes, but between the double shifts and the exhaustion, my grades tanked. One afternoon, I sat in the campus library staring at a blank screen, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. My latest assignment was due in 2 hours, but my brain felt like mush. I hadn't eaten all day. My head throbbed. I couldn't do this. I shut my laptop and walked straight to the dean's office. When I signed the papers to drop out, my hands felt numb. I had always wanted to be the first in my family to graduate college. Now that dream was slipping through my fingers like sand. When I walked out of that office, I wasn't a student anymore. I was just another guy barely getting by. That night, I sat on Mike's couch, staring at my phone, trying to figure out what to do next. Ashley called, like she always did. "Any luck with jobs?" she asked. I let out a humorless laugh. "If flipping burgers counts as luck, then yeah, I'm swimming in it." She hesitated. "You're not giving up, right?" I didn't answer. She must have heard something in my silence because her voice softened. "Jake, this isn't the end. You'll find something. I know you will." I wanted to believe her, but after weeks of job applications, rejection emails, and doors slamming in my face, I wasn't so sure anymore. A few days later, while flipping burgers on a slow afternoon, a man in a wrinkled dress shirt sat at the counter, rubbing his temples like the weight of the world was on his shoulders. I barely noticed him as I worked, just another tired soul trying to make it through the day. When he came up to pay, he glanced at the small laptop I had behind the register. "You into coding?" he asked, nodding toward the screen. I froze. "Yeah, I practice when I'm on break." He studied me for a moment. "I might have something for you." I blinked. "Wait, seriously?" He pulled a business card from his wallet and handed it to me. "My company's looking for entry-level IT guys. It's not glamorous, but it's a start." My hands shook as I took the card. For the first time in months, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. That night, I ignored my exhaustion and booted up my laptop. I hadn't felt this alive in months. With trembling fingers, I fixed up my resume, polishing it the best I could. It wasn't impressive. Just a list of self-taught skills and a few freelance projects I had done for free. But it was something. I sent the email before I could second-guess myself. And then, I waited. Days passed. Nothing. I started to think the guy had just been polite, that he never actually intended to follow through. Then, one evening, during my night shift at the office building, my phone buzzed. It was an email. "We'd like to invite you for an interview." I nearly dropped my phone. I borrowed Mike's only good dress shirt, hopped on a bus, and walked into a modest office that felt like an entirely different world from the greasy diner. Trevor, the guy from the restaurant, met me at the door. "You clean up well," he joked. I forced a nervous smile. He led me to a small room where I met Tina, his boss. She was sharp-eyed, no nonsense. The kind of woman who could see through any excuse. She scanned my resume. "You don't have a degree?" I swallowed hard. "No, but I've been teaching myself for years. If you give me a chance, I'll prove I can do the work." She didn't look convinced. Then her laptop froze mid-meeting. I leaned forward. "Mind if I take a look?" She arched an eyebrow but slid it over. 5 minutes later, I had it running again. She studied me for a long moment. Then she nodded. "All right. Let's see what you can do." The job was entry-level, the pay wasn't great, but I didn't care. For the first time in years, I was doing something I loved. Tina was tough but fair. She didn't hold my hand. She threw me into the deep end and expected me to swim, and I did. I worked insane hours, absorbing everything like a sponge. I still kept my night security job for extra money, sleeping only a few hours a night. Ashley worried about me. "You're going to burn out," she warned. I shrugged. I don't have a choice. But deep down, I knew this was different. For the first time, I wasn't just surviving, I was building something. Months passed. I climbed the ranks. Then one afternoon, Tina called me into her office. "Jake, you've been doing good work," she said, flipping through a folder. "But you're holding back." I blinked. "Holding back?" She leaned forward. "You're talented, but you're playing it safe. Comfort is nice, but it won't get you anywhere." Her words struck deep. That night, I made a decision. I stopped hesitating. I volunteered for harder projects, took risks. Then one day, Tina handed me my biggest challenge yet, a high-stakes client looking to modernize their IT infrastructure. "Think you can handle it?" she asked. My stomach flipped. I was terrified, but I forced a grin. Absolutely. For weeks, I worked non-stop. The night before the client presentation, I barely slept. As I walked into the boardroom the next morning, my hands were clammy, my heart beat in my throat. Executives in suits stared at me, waiting. I took a deep breath and started speaking. I expected them to tear it apart. But when I finished, the IT director simply nodded. "This looks good. Let's proceed." I nearly collapsed from relief. Tina clapped me on the back afterward. "Told you." For the first time in a long time, I believed her. Years passed. I climbed higher. And then, I took the biggest risk of my life. I quit. I had built a reputation, saved enough money, and made the right connections. It was time. Starting my own company was terrifying. The paperwork, the sleepless nights, the constant fear that everything would fail. But it didn't. Slowly, the business grew. I hired a team, landed contracts, and one day I realized something. I wasn't just making ends meet anymore. I was thriving. I had built this. From nothing. It was mine. And that felt better than any degree ever could. It started with a simple scroll through real estate listings. Ashley and I had been looking for a house for months, something cozy, something that felt like home. Then I saw it. My childhood home. For sale. I clicked on the listing, my heart pounding. The description was simple. Charming suburban home, in need of some repairs. Price to sell. I sat there, staring at the screen. I hadn't spoken to my parents in years. I had no idea what had happened to them, why they were selling, but one thought kept echoing in my head. I could buy it. The house where they told me I wouldn't make it. The house where they shut the door in my face. I could own it. It was impulsive, maybe even petty. But I didn't hesitate. I called my realtor. "I want it," I said. "The deal is done." A few weeks later, the papers were signed. I was the legal owner, and my parents had no idea. The property manager called me the next day. The tenants. "Want to meet with the new landlord," he said. "They want to discuss the rent." I almost laughed. "Set the meeting," I said. The face-off. The next evening, I parked in front of the house and walked up the steps, knocking like I belonged there. Because I did. My father opened the door. The look on his face was priceless. "Jake?" His voice was wary, like he wasn't sure if he was dreaming. I smiled. "Hey, Dad." Footsteps behind him. My mother appeared, her eyes wide. "What are you doing here?" she demanded. I exhaled slowly, enjoying the moment. "I came to talk business," I said. "You're looking at your new landlord." Silence. They looked at me, then at each other, then back at me. "You bought the house?" Dad's voice cracked slightly. "That's right," I said smoothly. "And we need to talk about rent." I sat on their couch. The same couch where they had once told me I'd never succeed. They sat across from me, stiff, uncomfortable. I leaned forward. "I'll keep this simple," I said. "Rent's tripling." Mom paled. "Jake, you know we can't afford that." I shrugged. "Not my problem. That's the market rate." Dad's jaw clenched. "You can't do this." I met his gaze. "You did it to me." The words hung in the air. For years they held all the power. Now it was mine. I left that night, feeling strange. I had won. I had proved them wrong. But as I drove away, I realized something. Buying the house didn't change the past. Raising their rent didn't heal old wounds. I had spent years chasing this moment, but now that it was here, it didn't feel as satisfying as I thought it would. Some battles weren't worth fighting, and some victories weren't victories at all. I sat in my car, hands gripping the steering wheel, staring at the house in my rearview mirror. I had dreamed about this moment for years, the day I would walk back into their lives, not as the broken kid they threw out, but as someone who had made it. Someone powerful, someone untouchable. And I had done it. I had walked in, delivered my final blow, and left them speechless. So why did it feel so empty? I exhaled slowly, tapping my fingers against the dashboard. This house. It was never about the bricks, the walls, or the mortgage. It was about the past, a past that had shaped me, scarred me, but no longer controlled me. I thought buying this house would fix something. That raising the rent would make them feel what I had felt. But the truth was, I wasn't that scared, desperate kid anymore. I had already won. Not because I owned their house, but because I didn't need their approval anymore. Because I had built a life that was mine. Because I had found success on my own terms. And most importantly, because I was free. I closed my eyes for a moment, then reached into the glove compartment, pulling out an envelope. Inside was a single piece of paper, a notice of rent adjustment. I hesitated. Then, with a small smile, I grabbed a pen and crossed out the new rent amount. I wrote in the old number instead, and then just below it, I scribbled 2 words, "Paid in full." I sealed the envelope, got out of the car, and walked back up the steps. For the last time. I slid the letter under the door, knocked once, and turned away before they could answer. I didn't need to see their reaction. This wasn't about them anymore. As I walked back to my car, I felt lighter, freer. I had spent so long trying to prove something. But the truth was, real success wasn't about revenge. It was about letting go. And as I drove away from my childhood home for the last time, I knew one thing for certain. I wasn't. Looking back, thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more shocking real-life stories happening around you.